She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't post a manifesto. Sophie Cunningham said one sentence to a reporter, and within 48 hours the White House was talking about it. A team owner got suspended, and one of the most powerful voices in sports media went on a 14-minute rant that he says he will never apologize for. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you're going to hear the exact words that started this, the coach who fired back at Cunningham in the most public way possible, and the one player everybody expected to speak up, who still, to this day, hasn't said a word. If this is your first time here, you already know we don't do the sanitized version of these stories. We go straight to what was actually said, on camera, on the record, no guessing. So before we get into it, do one thing for me, hit subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because this story is still moving, there are new developments happening basically every few days, and if you're not subscribed you are going to miss the next chapter of this before anybody else in your group chat even knows it happened. So subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let's get into it. It starts earlier this year, with a question that seemed almost routine. ESPN sat down with Indiana Fever guard Sophie Cunningham for a feature interview. She's already one of the most talked about players in the league, Caitlin Clark's teammate, her on-court protector, the player who throws herself into fights so Clark doesn't have to. But this time, the story wasn't about basketball at all. Cunningham was asked about the ongoing national conversation around transgender athletes in women's sports. And instead of dodging it, she looked at the camera and said something that would follow her for months. She said she wants to protect young girls in a locker room, or young girls in sport, who shouldn't have to compete against biological men. That's it. That's the sentence. No insults. No name-calling. Just that one line, and it detonated. The backlash was immediate. Cunningham said afterward that she got flooded with messages accusing her of hating transgender people. Her response? She pushed back hard. She said she never once said that. Her exact words were that she's here to extend love, but that with love comes truth, being honest. She said protecting children matters to her, and that little girls are included in that category, and she wasn't going to back down from it. And she really didn't back down. Days later, ahead of a game against the Connecticut Sun, reporters pushed her again, hoping she'd soften the statement or walk it back. Instead she doubled down, calling her position common sense, saying she'd always believe it, and posting on social media with 3 words that became a rallying cry for her supporters: I said what I said. Now here's where it gets bigger than one player's opinion. Just weeks before Cunningham's comments went public, the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled on laws in Idaho and West Virginia, upholding the right of states to bar transgender girls from competing on girls' and women's school sports teams. Cunningham tied her position directly to that legal backdrop, invoking Title IX by name, the same 1972 law that built the foundation of women's sports as we know it. She argued that without it, you wouldn't have the record books, the gold medals, or the packed arenas that women's basketball has today. So now you've got a Supreme Court ruling, a Title IX argument, and one of the WNBA's most visible players putting her name directly behind all of it, on the record, repeatedly. That combination is what turned this from a passing headline into a story the entire league could not ignore. And they didn't ignore it. Reaction poured in from every direction. Riley Gaines, the former college swimmer who's become one of the most recognizable voices in this debate nationally, publicly praised Cunningham and called on other elite female athletes to follow her lead. Political commentary followed almost instantly, with some framing Cunningham as brave for saying what plenty of athletes privately believe but won't say on camera. Other players and public figures pushed back just as hard, accusing her of targeting a community that already faces disproportionate scrutiny and hostility. A Seattle Storm co-owner was suspended for 5 games over comments made in the fallout. Author J.K. Rowling weighed in publicly as well, adding her voice to an already loud conversation. Within days, supporters had organized a public rally for Cunningham in Seattle. And through all of it, Cunningham kept saying the same thing over and over, that this isn't political for her, it's not about hating anyone, and that she considers herself, in her own words, very much in the middle. She said she agrees with things on both sides and disagrees with things on both sides, and that people love to assume otherwise. But the moment that really pushed this story into a different gear didn't come from Cunningham at all. It came from the opposing bench. When the Minnesota Lynx faced the Fever for the first time since Cunningham's comments went public, head coach Cheryl Reeve walked out for the game wearing a t-shirt that read, "Trans Kids Belong." Reeve has a long track record of speaking out on LGBTQ+ issues, so on its own, the shirt wasn't out of character for her. But the timing, her first matchup against Cunningham since the interview, was impossible to read as a coincidence, and it landed exactly as loud as you'd expect on a nationally broadcast game. That's when Stephen A. Smith stepped in. And when Stephen A. Smith decides to plant his flag on something, he does not do it quietly. On his self-titled SiriusXM show, Smith spent 14 straight minutes on this topic, and he did not hold back for a second. He went directly after Reeve, calling her decision to wear that shirt on the bench an irresponsible thing to do. His argument was that as the head coach of a women's basketball team, her job is to advocate for the women on that court, not to make a political statement on one of the league's biggest broadcast stages of the season. Here's the line that really set the internet on fire. Smith looked into the camera and said, "We gotta stop this. We gotta stop acting like somebody that's speaking up on behalf of girls, like the Sophie Cunninghams, like the Riley Gaineses, are scourges of the earth. You are Cheryl Reeve, the head coach of the Minnesota Lynx. That is an irresponsible thing to do. You are a coach for a female basketball team. Do you not think that the females are being screwed over if they have to compete against an individual born as a male? What are you talking about?" Now, Smith was careful, very deliberately careful, about how he framed his position. He said flatly that nobody is saying a person can't transition from male to female. His issue, in his words, was specifically about competing against women. He tied it straight back to Cunningham, saying, "That's what Sophie Cunningham was talking about." And he took direct aim at the financial side of it too, accusing Reeve of showing no regard for the WNBA, no regard for its sponsors, and no regard for how the moment could affect the league's bottom line. Smith didn't walk any of it back afterward either. He posted publicly that he wasn't backing down from what he said, adding that you can support people's rights and still believe biological men shouldn't compete in women's sports. Reeve, for her part, has defended her position as well, saying she believes the framing of the debate around her shirt is itself problematic. The two sides of this aren't converging anytime soon, and both of them know it. And then there's the player sitting closest to all of it, who still hasn't said a single word publicly. Caitlin Clark, Cunningham's own teammate, the player whose games are drawing the biggest crowds and the most cameras in the league, has not weighed in on the transgender athletes debate at all. Not in support of Cunningham. Not against her. Nothing. Given how much of this conversation orbits around her team, her games, and her public platform, her silence has become almost as talked about as Cunningham's original comments. Some reports suggest Clark has quietly pushed back on parts of what her teammate said, but Clark herself has not confirmed that on the record. So where does this actually leave things? You've got a Supreme Court ruling that just reshaped the legal landscape for this exact issue. You've got one of the WNBA's most popular players putting her name on the line, repeatedly, without backing down. You've got a rival coach answering her, not with words, but with a t-shirt on national television. You've got one of the loudest voices in all of sports media spending 14 minutes making sure everyone knew exactly where he stood. And you've got the league's biggest star, sitting right in the middle of it, saying absolutely nothing at all. That silence from Clark is the part nobody's talking about yet, and it might end up being the loudest statement of all, whenever, or if, she finally decides to break it. Because make no mistake, with the season still going and this conversation nowhere near finished, there is a very good chance one more name gets pulled into this before the year is over. And if that happens, you are going to want to already be subscribed, with notifications on, so you don't hear about it from somebody else first. If you want to see exactly where this goes next, subscribe now, drop your take in the comments, and let us know, do you think Caitlin Clark ever breaks her silence on this? We'll see you in the next one.